It was assigned. Yeah. You have three stories.
We got the estimate for well, this is when you start asking like not for a straight. Yes, for straightforward. It doesn't remember. What he remembers is
There's a bunch of people here. Yeah.
what is it?
Hi.
He said, well, there are things that want to grow.
Yeah.
I'm making this up. If there's an estimate for it, I think we ought to include it. Everybody wants that. Yeah.
This is from 2018.
Right.
And, well, this one's saying $1 million, but
Yeah.
so this was the second version, but.
It's just talking about something that would have to be harvested. There was a whole thing. The engineers are right here, right here.
Yeah. Also, two different options.
And then there's
On to
the right.
And then far over. There's not enough room. There's not enough room to build.
Yeah, over the sheets. I mean, this thing, just
It doesn't need to wait. Or.
which I don't understand what that means.
That
Where
was
is it?
next to
This is not, there's no land. There. All this is the property.
They don't
And
want
then
to go
there's
their
like
side.
a foot. This side. And I just don't know why. I don't feel like they like that. See why.
On top of. I couldn't agree more. They didn't give an estimate.
That's what this is. I know it's
Yeah. I don't know.
and it's a nonprofit, right?
So just, let's go for my.
It wouldn't be that much. These things all kinds of movers.
Yeah.
It's cold in here. I'm sorry, the heat's off. Off.
Right.
First decide.
You have to turn it off. You have to shut it off.
Yeah.
There's no balance.
Okay, I'll see if I can get one Jimmy. Probably gets us like 8 more.
Well, the thing is, that was just farmers. That probably these guys. 26. What I did, we're not.
Yeah.
Everybody get all 3 pages.
What did it say on here?
It just says how wide.
Well, it's
Oh, there's some sort of report. Yeah, I think it said.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's back there, you know, it's all like that.
So,
This is also Zoom.
Yeah. Hold up the board.
I do apologize for the last meeting. I didn't realize you were face to face. Someone had logged on and then saw you all sitting there.
Oh, really?
I had a meeting at 6:30 anyway.
So I assumed that's why.
Yeah, but if I had been like, no, it's face to face, I need to be there, I could have. So I would much rather end my day late, in Wisconsin than late, seriously.
I don't like. I don't see why you have.
Ask a question.
Yes, thank you.
I don't use it. That's why I get the.
Nobody puts water in
So you're welcome.
Well, thank you. I know we're gonna be in 600. What they did the last. I didn't go over that. Like, I had to that meeting with the last. Which is bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very nice, sir.
Yeah.
Did you lose our client?
We do.
We need a name tag for that. Everybody else has their names. It says town, you're Mr. Manager.
Well, we.
I've got enough too.
I'm not gonna say anything, not nice.
All right. Call the meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. If you are in the room, if you would please stand and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just a reminder, we are live on Zoom and YouTube as well. So just please speak up whether you're on Zoom or not on Zoom. And just a reminder for those on Zoom to please do keep muted unless you are speaking, just so we don't have any feedback. So we're going to start right off with capital requests. So the waterfront committee presentation is first on the agenda.
Do you guys want to sit in the dark? Is that?
No, I'm gonna look in the right now.
I can't see.
I like them in the dark. I want to be in the dark. It doesn't matter. I was gonna zoom on.
Maybe you can. Jerry, do you mind just closing that door so that?
I'm sure.
Okay. Lights on. The light is on.
Oh,
You have to turn yours on.
There you go. Is that what I want?
there we go. Yeah.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm Susan Ralston from Wiscasset Waterfront Committee, currently the chair. We've been working for a long time, it seems. We had an issue, we got a grant to have an engineering study done to put slips down on the recreational pier. Simple, update the harbor master building with some amenities like showers, you know, a couple of showers and the restroom, like that, and, these slips would have, electric and water coming to them. And we researched, area marinas, both public and private, to, you know, decide on what we felt comfortable charging, and how we could, generate revenue for the waterfront. So I don't know if you've read through your extension report, if anybody's got questions, happy to answer, or some of the committees here as well.
One question I had was, I know you said, you're recommending the SHIP grant versus the big grant. And I was just curious what, I know it said in general, like why, but I was curious about, one, can we apply for both? And, okay.
Piece of grant. I tried. Emily Rabi, Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. I work with the Waterfront Committee on this report. So you're correct. There are 2 DOT programs. The reason we're proposing SHIP is because it's administered at the state level, where BIG is administered at the federal level. So it's a lot more competitive. And while the match is less, they require a minimum of 25%. That's just the baseline. Really, they want to see communities propose more than a 25% match. And they tend to be for larger scale projects. So for something of this nature, where it's, you know, 14 slip recreational pier, versus, you know, a much larger scale, say industrial waterfront type complex, that's the type of program you'd be going to for big, where this seems more in line with SHIP for a 50% match. Now, the other benefit with SHIP is that it's a rolling deadline versus a one-time-a-year deadline. So if the board recommended to bring this to, you know, town vote, it's voted for the match, we could then start having conversations and work with DOT to start putting an application together rather than waiting, you know, say another year, calendar year to apply for the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah, Tom Joyce with the Budget Committee. I had a number of kind of observations and questions about it, but I think the main questions I would ask are, first, what is an acceptable payback for a project like this to the town? Because this was 9 years, I think, as I read it. When we look at capital projects like this that have a degree of risk to it, what is good? Is there a hurdle rate that we think we need to get over? Is 9 years good? 9 years seem long.
9 years seems long to me.
Right. What if I don't understand what the 9 years is?
The payback.
Okay.
Payback on revenue. I think they've underestimated the revenue on this fairly substantially to try to be somewhat realistic with it. So I think the payback will be less than that. I would prefer to see a payback of more like 5 years on it than 9 years. I think 5 years is a bit optimistic. But you know, they put more work into this than I did, so they probably can answer that question better than I can.
Our calculation did show a 5-year payback.
And those were with our conservative figures that would end up.
Yeah, I apologize. I just read this an hour ago and I thought it said 9
I think
It does
I
say
think
that.
in there it does, yes.
It might say, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, just as an observation, that the assumptions pretty much across the board are very conservative. And it would be useful, I think, to see a scenario 3, because you had scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3 that said, okay, if you actually use less conservative, what might a realistic payback be? And if you have an ability to show 5, I think that would be very useful for folks to see. The other question I had is personnel cost. As far as I could see in a simple pass through it, the only personnel cost that was shown was, I think, in Ted Snowden's area for, it was like a half a person or $10,000 a year. I spent a lot of time on marinas and we run the yacht club, and I think you need a couple of full-time people at a minimum to operate 14 slips. I don't think you could do it without that. And I was curious as to whether or not that's factored into the financial analysis and the payback period.
Well, I do know that we've already got Ted down there, so I think he was thinking of additional 10,000 compared to who's already down there doing maintenance, including the restrooms and whatnot. And the restrooms are basically going to stay the same as far as operating the marina. I think because if I read it correctly, there's a line in the budget for an assistant dock person to help Larry with whatever's going on down there. Once again, that was conservative, so that's what I don't know. Maybe, I guess we could do that.
Would the pump outs be self-service? Someone has to run that for the folks?
A lot of people know how to run a pump out that use marinas, isn't that so, that they can self-service?
Yes, you
Yeah.
can, but I don't think you can run a marina without a couple of people there full-time. When you pull up to a marina and you don't know how to use that because it's a different one than what you're used to, somebody needs to be there. When you call in on the radio and say, I'm coming in, which slip do I go to, somebody can help me with that, I think you need 2 full-time people. That's my feedback.
And do you mean 2 full-time, 8 hours a day? 5
I
days a
mean,
week?
people at the dock during the hours that the dock
The
is.
dock hours?
I think that would be a big piece of feedback from me.
I believe there's some confusion about transient traffic versus rental slips. We were talking about renting the slips to people year round, not having transient people coming in.
In the proposal, you've got 2 scenarios that both have transients in them.
Just on the very outside ones, and it's, we're basically looking for long-time rental on slips, so it's not very labor intensive. They know that they've got their slip, you know, they're gonna have their power in that water, and there's nothing else for anybody else to do for them because they rented their slip, it's their slip. So that takes a lot of labor out of it. We're trying to cut down labor, but also make a recapture for the town to every year to have money keep coming in. I think there's a confusion.
Yeah,
And the
there's-
other factor involved with this is that there's temporary tie-ups now, overnight tie-ups, and the harbor master controls them and collects fees from people. And in talking with them, that would be the same for this. Those 2 outboard slips may or may not be used for transit. They may be permanent. We may get someone that wants to have an outboard slip. And so, like David said, there should be no activity that would require an individual
Right.
on a daily basis to service these seasonal rentals. Transient is what we have now along the direct floats, and that will continue.
So we're not trying to attract visitors to town because of the marina. Is the bottom line.
We don't have a marina, that's.
Well, this is what you're trying to build.
That's on the horizon. I think it will attract people.
But then you're saying you really aren't set up to attract people, it's mostly for locals.
Well, that's our thinking. However, I think it's going to depend on what the final decisions are and the season even.
And we want to make it so we can expand it if need be, you know, in the future. If it goes, if it sells like we think it's gonna, we'll have to expand the project, you know, down the road.
Kathy?
I just have a question. The slips that you're talking about renting, are there any slips or for the transients? I mean, other than overnight docking? Is that what, or is it?
There's, in estimate 1, there are 2 transient slips, and in estimate 2, there are 4.
Okay.
So, versus, and then the rest are seasonal, correct?
I would think that if you're going to be attracting, which the whole purpose is to attract people, that they would have more than one overnight option if they wanted to stay and, you know, for a couple of days or whatever, or even 3 days, or, you know, could put a ceiling on it maybe, I don't know. I mean, you want people to come.
We also took into account that we also have 3 town moorings that are available also. So we added the 2 transient ones outside, plus the 3 town moorings. 5 boats per night is, you know, it's optimistic right now, but in the future it might not be, you know. So that's where we went with the 3 additional town moorings.
Yeah.
We added to it.
I like the idea of building slowly and conservatively. I think that makes a lot of sense. I have heard from people in town who expressed a lot of enthusiasm for having a marina down there, myself included, but I've also heard from some residents who are concerned that maybe this isn't something that would be right for Wiscasset. So I think that if we start conservatively and build slowly, like this plan, then that makes a lot of sense, you know, so that we can grow it, let it develop organically. I think that's smart.
Tom, did you have a?
Well, you know, is it helpful to provide, not to fill your whole meeting, but I had a number of very specific pieces of feedback on the proposal that might be helpful. Can I do that in an email later? Would that be appropriate or no?
How, yeah, it's probably appropriate to do it now, but I wanted to call on Emily first, just, and then come back to you, John.
So I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. The first being that the Shore and Harbor grant that the town received back in 2020 was to increase recreational boating opportunities. So the reason the waterfront committee talked about a small amount of transient slips and more seasonal, especially as this gets kicked off, is that we're not anticipating many boaters are necessarily going to come up 12 miles up the river, at least to start. And so the goal was to increase those recreational opportunities for those members in town that, you know, have a boat or looking for waterfront access. And that's partly why the costs are conservative to start. There's nothing to say that those numbers couldn't increase, whether in terms of, you know, revenue, whether it's a seasonal or transient overnight number. And how we got to those numbers was looking at the extensive research the waterfront committee did to see what private and public marinas are, you know, up and down the main coastline, to see where we would fit in terms of amenities. Also acknowledging that we do have to come further up from the open water in order to access Wiscasset. The other item I wanted to clarify is that this report is just preliminary in nature to ask essentially that we move forward with trying to get the SHIP grant and trying to set aside that match for that grant opportunity. So not every operational decision has been made. This is more of just a theoretical understanding of what could potentially happen. So, you know, Dennis said earlier, you know, this is a conservative estimate. If you look at the transient estimates, we're only estimating about 30% occupancy for the season. And that's intentionally low because we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver in terms of those first few years as we're getting us off the ground. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, I think my overall comments are, I think that you do need to have it staffed, so I've made that comment. Even if you have 2 transient slips, I don't think you can leave that unoccupied. That needs to be in a plan, in my opinion. The other thing I mentioned, I'd like to see a much shorter payback. I think you can get there with different assumptions. I don't think you're charging enough. I don't think 30%. I think 30% is easily exceedable. You know, I think if some of those changes are made, if you're charging for power, which everybody does, it wasn't in that plan, you can get a lot more out of this. And I think you can get that payback period down to a point where it's more like 4 or 5 years. And I think, in my opinion, I would certainly like to prefer to see 4 to 5 years as a payback period versus 9.
Okay. Did you have other? No? Oh, okay.
All set.
Bill?
Yeah, my remark about opening it to the public was on page 10 of 12. There's a last paragraph that's talking about just, going on websites and everything and getting, magazines and so on, bringing the public in. So I thought we were doing a lot for trying to be bring people into the town, using the marina.
I think it's really important to remind people that we're here and that we will have a facility, hopefully. And we're hopeful that we can up our overnight moorings. We're updating the mooring field as we speak. And so hopefully we'll have some other town moorings to bring.
Any questions from online? Okay. Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move down.
I have one quick question. Do we have fuel facilities down there?
No. Yes, if we have fuel facilities down there.
No, sorry.
It's okay.
It really is not a worry yet.
All right, moving down to manager requests in terms of capital funds as well. Dennis, do you want to introduce this?
So this is a bit of a shock factor, I suppose, for everybody that sees this bottom line here. It was kind of meant to be a little bit. The purpose for these spreadsheets that you all have is to give you some sense of what it is it takes to run this town every year, with the assets that we have, need to take care of in order to run this town every year. And I think they're kind of considerable for a town the size. Dusty, I forget how you put this asset in. Big city and small town. Yeah, big city and a little town. And when you're going to provide all these services, you know, these are some of the costs that go along with that. We look at the operating budget every year, but this is a consideration as well. Now, some of these things that are in here, I'm just estimating costs on. I'm just taking a wild guess because I just, you know, the clock steeple. I don't know. I haven't been able to get anybody up there to look at it to tell me what it actually means as of yet. So I'm just putting a number in there. But anyways, I mean, like the budget, this was a place to start. And we can whittle it down from here and decide what needs to be done. But you know, we have a history of, you know, maybe we don't need to do that this year. We can wait till next year, and then the next year comes, and the next year comes, and all of a sudden, you know, we're behind on things. So I don't. Rob's not here. Right, Chief? So.
Usually when we look at this, the requests, we have a sense of what we have to spend, that percentage from the growth. Can you tell me about that? How do we do it?
It's, you know, generally it's a maximum of 4.5%.
Right, I'm just wondering what that amount is this year.
Which would be.
While he's doing that, I just want to say thanks to Dennis, and I know there are members of the budget committee who helped put together this.
The budget committee did most of the work on this. Bill Maloney started the spreadsheet. We got it, and really got it going.
It's great to see, you know, the next 10, to see it 10 years out from right now, because we never, well, I mean, I don't know about never, but not since I've been here have we done this.
So if we stick with the 4.5%, we should be somewhere in the $580,000 range.
All right.
And the what? 580,000.
Thank you.
I don't think in the years that I've been here, it's never been that. I don't know if there's been a year they've taken that little bit out of it or not.
So, open up questions? Comments?
So one thing that's not on here is the heating system for this building. You'll notice it's a little chilly in here tonight. We had to turn the heat off because the heat wouldn't turn off. It was just running nonstop. We've had a lot of problems with heat in this building the last year. The boiler in this building is almost 30 years old. So it's past its useful life. We're spending a lot of money repairing it, so I am trying to get some estimates on replacing it. We got one estimate the other day for heat pumps, which I think are a great idea, but the estimate was $495,000. Which, yeah, that's what I said too. And it is only one estimate, and there are other avenues, so we're trying to explore it as quickly as we can. Try to get something in this project if we can.
Do you have a sense of Scout Hall and the old Rick School at all, since you said this or not?
On the school.
Well, Scout Hall, we kind of had talked about, I threw a figure in here, I just, we talked about roof and siding, but we haven't really gotten a firm estimate.
I would say that would be down the road. That would be probably another 3 years maybe.
For Scout Hall?
Yeah, for the roof. And the siding.
Okay.
It was fine when I had to bring it. I had stuck out of that out.
And you said you don't have one for the clock tower yet?
No, and I think, that, what I put in there is high, I hope. But the guy from Midman
Oh,
Restoration.
so it's in here.
There is, I put 75,000.
Oh, okay. So do we have a total, wait, is there a total? Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna answer my own question. Hang on. I was looking for total for this year, based on what you're.
All the way down.
This is, I know, I'm trying to go on the right one here. Is that, okay, is it the 1.8?
Yeah.
Is that, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's everything that was on this.
But I think if you remember, there's more than what's in there actually. But I think if you remember last fall, when we were talking about things, and it was Pam, I think, that brought it up. I said, I think we're gonna end up having to spend around $2 million to get caught up with all this stuff. And it wasn't really all that far off. I didn't expect to have to do the ambulance this year. If we decide not to do it, we're gonna gamble, but, it may take a while to get one.
Can I ask some questions for Kim Dulce's on an airplane, sent an email before she got on the plane, asking some questions. I want to ask them on her behalf. I've answered a few of them myself. One was, I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but Public Works, are these all new vehicles that you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay, and she wants to know that, and I think the answer is no, are they all separate line items on the warrant?
That's up to the board, but they can be, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, can you just walk us through the spreadsheet altogether? So like this giant spreadsheet, this is a list of all the things that we own in town?
Yes, it's a list of all of the things that each department has that we insure.
Okay,
So that's where all of this information came from, is from our insurance stuff.
We can come back to that, but did you have other ones?
Okay. On the paving, is the paving put out to bid, or do we do it ourselves, or is it a mixture?
Oh, it's put out a bid, we do no payment.
And she wants to know if they can pay the Wisconsin Community Center parking lot. Is that included in any of this?
It's included in the community center request, yes. Although I'm not sure, we talked about maybe chip sealing it would be a little bit cheaper, but I'm not sure how chip seal would hold up in the parking lot.
That was the next question. Okay. Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Kim, did you?
I just wanted
Yeah, so
like
Kim, my purpose in doing this,
spreadsheet for dummies 101, walk me through this.
my purpose for doing this was to show you how each department, all of this stuff that each department has that they need to run their departments.
Yeah,
And some of the things that, we don't think of and don't see on a regular basis. Now, not all of this stuff has to be capital requests. Some of the stuff can be just part of the regular operating.
But everything that's on here is stuff we already have.
This is stuff that we already have, that we have to maintain, that we have to replace, that we have to
And then
repair.
Here's the current value,
Mhm.
the life expectancy, replacement cost. None of that is request. The request is in the line FY 23.
Yeah,
So then when it says 400,000 for the fire department tank number 4, that's the cost to replace that.
correct.
And then the community center has a request for 170,000.
So
Do we have
80
a
80
detail?
of that is for the roof. So remember last year, we appropriated 80,000 to do the roof.
Yeah,
It was nowhere near enough. Once we had the engineering work done and the damage, some of the other damage that they found, it wasn't gonna be enough. And so last year, it was gonna end up being north of 130,000. And everything's gone up this year, so we're figuring it's gonna be closer to 150. So we got like 70 left, 75 left.
so that 170 is for roofing and for paving.
Yes. The estimate on paving was 88,000.
What's the 50,000 to reseal the sand shed? What does that mean?
Where we keep the sand and salt, the building's 30+ years old and the rivets and the screws have gone. And it's just something we can't, with the height of it, we don't have the tools or the technology to reseal it.
Okay, thank you.
Are you talking about where the sand is?
Big sand shed, one with the big piles.
Okay. The roof
Yeah,
is falling off.
it's not falling off, it's leaking. We've sealed the best that we could get to.
And that was an estimate, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe a little less.
Maybe to shave it down.
And then Dennis, can you tell us about the ambulances we have purchased over the past 4 years?
Well, we just bought the new one last year, which replaced the 2012. That was, the truck itself was in 2012, but the box was from 2006. So we remounted it one time. The truck that this would replace is a used truck that we bought from the city of Auburn before I came to work here. I think they bought it.
Like right before you came to work here,
Yeah,
right? Like I think I was
Yeah,
there.
Toby was here. Toby was still here when that happened. So they bought that used. That truck currently has 96,000 miles on it. And the box is starting to corrode on it pretty bad. Like I said, you know, we can get another year, might be able to stretch it for 2, but because of the backlog in the issue with getting chassis, for one thing, and then the backlog that's creating, if we don't get into queue fairly soon, it might be 3 or 4 years before they get caught up.
Okay.
Maybe. Worst case scenario. But as I said, we can appropriate the funds. That does not necessarily mean we'll spend it. We can sit in the account and keep making money over and over again. And we'll just take them out when it happens, if it's 2 years from now or 2.5 years from now.
Okay. What about the steeple and clock tower? You said that was just a guesstimate.
It's just a guesstimate. I think I've gone on the high side with it. You know, and that's one of those things that's just been postponed. And the gentleman that owns the private residence now, he's had to do some repairs because the flashing around the steeple was not good and it was leaking into his home. You know, we just can't allow that to deteriorate to the point where it's damaging somebody else's property. And it's kind of insulting to those that left us the clock to leave it in the condition that it's in.
Mhm.
I think, you know, they think, you know, Susan said it was an embarrassment not to have bathrooms downtown. I think it's more of an embarrassment for people to look at that. That's just my opinion.
I'm sorry, I don't know what chip sealing is, but does that last as long? I know it's cheaper.
Chip seal,
It
what
depends.
the chip seal has to do is you need traffic on it, you need to pack it in, it's just little rocks. And we have to keep sweeping it until these rocks are gone and it gets into people's driveways and
It doesn't work.
and we've tried it in numerous places. Willow Lane, that chip seal, that's going Ford Road. I could see putting it not in a parking lot, because it's never gonna get packed in. It's gonna be, you're gonna slip on it. It'll be loose rocks,
Okay.
small rocks.
Okay, thank you.
There are people that like it, there are people that don't like it.
Which, good in its application, you know.
In the right application, it's probably good. And there's probably some of our side streets that we could use it on that are fairly low volume that aren't gonna beat it up. And maybe we can get more streets done that way as opposed to hot topping everything, which, you know, I think this year is gonna be really expensive.
It throws the little stones everywhere, like just people driving on it.
Yeah. Terry, would you?
I really feel very strongly about doing it right the first time. But I do appreciate your comment that we could get more streets done, small streets done with a little bit less expensive process, and I think.
You know, I wouldn't do it on one of the heavy volume streets. That's just gonna be a
Right.
problem. And that's not doing it right the first time, so.
Is that?
Power cord. Everybody.
For your Mac?
Yeah.
I have one for a Mac.
Okay. Other questions?
I have other questions, but I don't know if we've done this.
Just a general comment, this building is aging very quickly, or perhaps it's aging right on time. But at some point, does the planning committee look at things like that? You know, does the planning committee do some of this
Planning
work?
as in comprehensive plan?
Comprehensive plan?
I mean,
I
in
mean,
theory,
in theory, yeah.
Okay, I was interested in that, because I want to know where would we make the comment, we need to put town hall on the list somewhere and say, because I'm looking at
it is.
Yeah.
FY 32 to replace it,
Replace
What,
the
this-
entire building?
This building?
to replace this building, or to renovate it up to standard. We have too many things that are falling apart.
Well, we've got the roof, and is the HVAC system in here?
No, it's not on.
No,
Yeah, what I'm saying,
that's not.
we can do it piecemeal.
I hate
You know.
doing things piecemeal.
We could do it piecemeal, you know, one wall at a time, or we can plan, get a planner, get a person who is able to evaluate what we've got here and say, here's how you can use what you've got, but improve it, and it will last for another 30 years.
Yeah.
We don't have anything here that gives me the confidence it's gonna last another 30 years or 50 years. So,
Well, I think that's why we need to take some of these steps that Dennis is suggesting. I mean,
well, a roof is just piecemeal.
Well, this building doesn't even, this roof was done here, what?
In the last 7 years.
Yeah, it's been the last 8 to 10 years. And it's
So
not-
then
not
why?
that-
The building's 1967, so you can.
It's a 1967 building,
Heating
right?
system, things like that.
You know,
Wait,
and
so
that's,
why
that's,
is the roof?
that's normal stuff. I mean, the heating system's 30 years old.
Unless
I
they
mean,
make
They
it,
don't
it's
last
not
forever. But you know, and I was talking to David yesterday, and he brought up a great point. You know, the outside of this building has never had anything done to it. It's never been sealed of any kind.
Never been repointed or sealed or anything.
You know,
All those brick buildings in town have never been done.
Brickwork needs some attention once in a while.
So the bricks are gonna fall off like the one.
Well, well, they are
Another
now the
150
wastewater treatment plant currently. They're not as, we're not in that bad a shape as. No, that's not gonna happen anytime soon, but
Can I ask another question?
Tom, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, Dennis, Ted, and I may be looking at the wrong column, on the transfer station. I think we had a few items in there that were supposed to be FY 23 items that I don't see in that column. It doesn't look like there's anything there on the transfer station. This year. Are we on that, Mac trailer?
Max in there.
Is it in there?
No, they moved it off.
The MAC is in the budget. So a lot of the things for the transfer station, we do not take out of capital, we put it in the budget.
Yeah.
Because then Alna and Westport pay a share of that cost.
Okay.
So it doesn't come out of capital.
Okay, that helps. I just didn't know. I was trying to eyeball what I thought was there. And it's
And maybe, were we talking about replacing the Bobcat this year? Because I didn't put it here.
No, we didn't put it this year, we got the tool cat up there,
Yeah,
now
we-
we're gonna
yeah.
run it for another year and run it through the regular budget.
Yeah, so Tom, what we did was we bought the new Bobcat for Public Works last year and took the old one that they had, which we're trying to extend the life on as much as we can, move that up there.
now, the other thing that was on the spreadsheet I was looking at, it's not on here for the transfer station, is the roof. Was the roof?
That can come out of regular station maintenance budget.
Okay.
It's got some leaking.
I noticed
leaking around.
Okay, thank you.
So when you jump down underneath the paving, Dennis, there's a line computer systems, various workstations,
Yeah.
wastewater,
That's-
309,000.
Some of
What
this
is
is
that?
just, some of this is just notes for myself. So
Okay.
actually, the
So what's the
wastewater,
total? I'm at the bottom line
the wastewater is legitimate. This is what Rob has asked.
for 309,000 for computers
No,
upgrades.
no, just for their upgrades. Forget the workstation. I scratch that out.
Okay,
Just scratch that out.
so the total that is being proposed here is 1.9 million, not 1.389.
Well, we're gonna take, we're gonna move 75 out of it, so.
Okay.
But the bottom line is 1,898,000.
And that's, okay, so that's with like 200,000 for paving, 309,000 for wastewater. Do we know what, does it say on here, the wastewater? Do we have a breakdown for what they need that for? Or is that just for
Yes.
all of the things in our
No,
monthly
he had-
reports?
He had
He
something,
needs-
but I don't think, let me go grab a copy for you.
I mean, I read the monthly reports, I know there's like everything over there.
Madam Chairman, I have a note that I had meant to get in before Dennis finished this, and I just reminded myself of it. The wall in the interior wall in the sunken garden is, the stones are falling out. I didn't get Dwayne down there. He is the director in charge of that. I've taken pictures of it. It is, it's been probably falling down for 100 years, but one wall was replaced approximately 10 years ago. Is that about right? Does anybody remember? Before, okay. Anyway, one wall was the wall that is the Main Street side wall that's parallel with Main Street, has been redone. The other two walls are original to the house, which was, 1800s. And the hotel. And it's being held up basically by the plant, the espalier, I'm losing my words. That is growing there. But there are other stones that are literally rolling out at the bottom that are not held in place by the planting. We have a problem that needs to be addressed. If not this year, perhaps the next year, and I'm looking at, things that need to be put on the schedule at this point.
And one of the walls in this garden.
Yes, she mentioned that the other day.
Thank goodness he remembered that.
So one thing that we've taken off of this that Ted's gonna try to work on is item number 1. So that's not included in this 309,000. Now, I think we'll be able to reduce this 309,000 a little bit this year because the county is use some of their ARPA funds for the 4 wastewater treatment plants in the county. And we could potentially get up to $200,000 to help out with that. So their deadline's, however, not until April 15th. So I won't know that for sure until after we have to have our warrant done.
So at one of our recent meetings, forgive me for not remembering exactly which one, but Rob was talking about the inevitability in a fairly near term that we'll need to move the whole wastewater treatment plant. So I'm wondering, I mean, I'm no sewer treatment expert, so I don't know how much of this stuff we absolutely have to have, but if the plan is to move it within something like 10 years-ish, that was the impression I got from him.
Yep.
Does it make sense to, put 300,000 into it now, if we're gonna be moving it, and maybe we should think about that?
None of this stuff is down at the plant. He's talking about manhole covers that are out around town, the pump stations that are out around town. He and I have talked pretty extensively about not putting a great deal of money into that building, that plant down there, just based on the fact that at this point, we don't know how long it's gonna be there. It sounds like Oliver's saying, well, the climate change study means it doesn't have to move, but the state's saying something else. And the state's gonna be the one that's actually gonna make that determination. So we are being cautious about trying to dump a whole lot of money into it if we know it's not gonna be there. So Rob, you have anything you want to add to that?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't realize you were in there.
Okay. Dennis is right. We've been focusing on having items addressing problems that are around in the collection system, things that are focused mostly on pump stations and pipes in the ground. You'll see one of the items is $150,000 for camera examining the pipe system. Part of the reason for that is that Olver's study of the collection system seems to indicate that we really need to do a lot of camera work, and after that, possibly some repair work. Their guesstimate of that exploration was between $66,000 and $150,000. And it hasn't really been examined and repaired since the 1990s. So we expect to find, quite a few cracks, leaks, and included in this is that there are over 100 manholes that need rehab work. And, that's a different item, but just to give you an idea, repair work was done. I mean, that's a bit of a long time ago. You'll notice there's a couple of other items on there that do include things at the plant, but they're things, if the plant was to move tomorrow, you would still be looking 3 or 4 years down the line before your engineering studies and everything enabled us to move somewhere. And we'd even have to find a place to move to. But a couple of those things are eminently failing. One of them is a blower at the plant. There are a couple of pumps. Even if we move, they said move tomorrow. I mean, we'd still need to run those pumps. And another thing is the fuel oil tanks we have for the heating at the sewer plant. Those tanks are corroded and rusting to the max. And I would like to change them before they start to leak or collapse. So just in passing, a lot of these things are things that just are wearing out. There's a lot of decay, and many of the items are 30 years old. So motors that run nonstop, pumps that run off and on 100 times a day, those types of things you still have to maintain. So that's why I have them on the list. I was telling Dennis, I'm absolutely not trying to upgrade something big at the plant until we hear the results of that study. And that will be by the end of March, we'll have that report.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Other questions?
I guess process, so we've got these requests and we're,
Yep, at some point, we need to start making some decisions on
Yeah.
what's going on that warrant, and we have to have that done by April 14th, so, you know, at the meeting next week, you guys are gonna have to start making some decisions as to what's going on.
So typically when we make those decisions, we have the, it's this one-page sheet that shows the tax commitment. It's like a, you know, draft or a work in progress.
Yep, well, that was
County
one-
tax, we're gonna,
that,
no, I don't think that.
yes,
I don't think that, it's the
Yeah,
one where
it
you
was-
actually figure like, if we do this and we do that, then this is what, the,
yes, it'll be, and it'll just be an estimate, though, it won't be.
yeah, I
And
know,
I don't know what the school is gonna do as of this moment,
right?
so, I mean, that could throw a monkey wrench into a whole lot of things.
It's like a mock-up of the tax commitment and.
Yep.
And then we use that and we're like, okay, well, if we, because then there's always, I mean, this is a different board than boards in the past, but typically I'm looking at some of the old board members, you guys remember, we would sit and have discussions about whether you wanted to take part of that 4% and use it to reduce the impact, and some people are in the no, we can't do that camp, and other people are in the why can't we do that camp, we've got, you know, $14 million in the bank. So, yeah, that, I would like to be able to have those numbers so that when we are making these decisions, we actually know how it could impact everybody's pocketbook.
I can tell you right now that based on some of the changes that I made today, so we wanted to put another full-time person into the Parks and Rec. I put another full-time person into EMS, but I pulled out the full-time fire chief. And made some other tweaks. County tax, I did get a better idea on. We had 695 for county tax. It's going to be closer to 730. So that's on the high side. They haven't done their commitment yet. And they haven't decided what they're going to use for their own surplus to reduce that commitment, but that's the outlier for that. As it stands right at the moment, if the school budget does not change, and I would be very surprised if it does, even though they are getting more money from the state, they're under the same pressures that we've been under. The total budget would be $12,887,003.
I'm sorry, again?
$12,887,003. Taking out non-property tax revenues, which I anticipate will be $513,991 more than last year, would leave us a tax commitment of about $9.5 million, which is $385,000 more than last year. And anticipating, as I said in a previous meeting, we've collected 89% of our revenues already this year. So we will have a revenue surplus. I don't expect to see a huge operating budget surplus because some of our budgets are under pressure because of the electricity increases and increases in fuel. But I think we would have sufficient fund balance left over from this year that you could put towards reducing the tax commitment. And I'd love to say it because I don't want to be held to it, but we could probably do this without the tax increase this year. But we would have to use some of the leftover funds from this year.
Okay.
But given that we pumped our undesignated fund balance back up to a more comfortable level, I'm a little more comfortable doing that than I would be in another time. So
Wow.
that's kind of where we're
Nice job.
standing right now.
Well, it all could change, but that sounds good so far.
But, and that's what I've been striving to do, is try to get this down so that we can provide these services without hitting the taxpayer with a huge increase this year.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Jenny.
You know, it's still a work in progress.
I
but
understand.
it's-
Bill?
For Dennis, I'm under the impression that our investments have done better than average in the last couple of years.
The last several years.
Okay, last several years. Would that allow us to take more than the 4.5% out to cover some of these expenses?
Let me,
Is that an ordinance? an addendum to Bill's question,
And I think it's just an agreement.
just an agreement.
That's my
We
In
understanding.
terms of taking more out,
Yeah,
well, in general, no, it's not smart to take,
I can give you, I have the quarterly report from
and we've been.
the last quarter, so.
Well, it's just an off the head.
So, off the top of my head, when this fund started with Payson back in 2010, it went in with just over $12 million. You've taken just over $9 million out of it in that time frame, and it's made $15 million. So you started with 12. At the end of December, you were sitting roughly with somewhere around 18 million. Now, 4 of that is restricted funds, so we'll just
Right.
set
You're
those
getting
aside.
the restricted funds. Would it make sense, since we have made extra money than normal, that we could take more than 4.5% out for some of these capital expenditures?
Oh, I certainly think so. That is my goal.
we've done that in the past. I mean, I've only been here 4 years, but we've also taken some out to reduce the tax increase. Like, and I know it's not advisable, but we've done it and we're still sitting on more money every year, knock on wood.
You know, they have done, Payson's done a great job with this investment account. They've done a fantastic job.
If we can offset a tax increase without that, then I recommend taking some extra money out of the investments to take care of some of these capital expenditures, because if we don't do it this year, we have next year, the next year.
It's just kicking the can down the road, and I think that's what's happened in town over the years, is, you know, we just keep kicking the cans down the road, and this is what happens. Now, usually community center roof is a great idea. I mean, it's probably should have done beforehand, and now we're looking at a much bigger increase, but we couldn't have anticipated that.
Judy?
I don't know if you still have it, but there was a finance committee that would meet, I think it was called finance committee, that would meet and make recommendations about that. And generally, it always stops at that 4.5, but do you still have that committee?
The investment committee meets quarterly, yeah. And they meet with Dan Lang, and Dan's opinion has been, you know, we've done really well with this over the years. You know, you probably should take advantage of it. And I think we probably should. I mean, I know it's a lot of money, but I think we need to get caught up with some of this stuff and stop kicking these cans down the road, because you look at this and say, oh, wow, maybe we could pare it back to $1 million. Well, at some point, we're going to spend that other $1 million and then some. You know, it's hard. And again, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted you guys to see this list of stuff is to see what we need to maintain. It's a lot. If you're going to provide all of these services, this is more along the lines of the true cost of what I think you need to be looking
And if you put it to a vote, the voters want all the services.
Thank you.
You know, and when the voters get to a point of saying, you know what, we're done, we don't want this anymore. You know, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But
Am I correct in looking at this, that essentially if we try to catch up over the next 3 years, then it gets more manageable in terms of?
yeah,
more
that's
of a
why
schedule?
I tried to kind of project this out over 10 years so that you could kind of see, you know, I certainly expect it will change, you know, capital budgets change frequently, so, but you know, that was the idea, to give you some idea. We should get caught up, then we can probably stay on track and not have to have these big years.
Justin?
What are these for FY 24 and 25 for the community center? What are those for?
I have to go pull Glenn's list. I know some of it's, I can pull the list if you want.
Well, I have another question. On the paving, how are these 6 roads determined? What about the others?
That's 10.
Yeah, I was wondering how these 6 roads were chosen for paving, and the other roads in town that need attention, when did those get put on the list?
Well, it all come out of the capital. Right now.
But you mean, how is it prioritized?
Yeah,
Is
well,
that what you're asking?
yeah, like Indian Road is in terrible shape. It's got a big hole in it, it's being filled with dirt now, and I would think that would need to be done this year as well.
Well, then I've got the Brown Road in the worst shape. I gotta pick the worst one to go with it. So I know that spot on the Union Road, and dug it out twice, keeps coming back, there's ledge there, yeah. And it will smooth out for the summer.
So Ted and I are actually working on a road improvement program, a road improvement schedule, where we can take all the roads, list them as excellent, good, fair, poor, whatever it is, so that we get on a regular schedule of making sure that we get caught up and we stay caught up with what we're doing.
Yeah, I've got a lot of it on paper now, it just isn't in the machine with the computers.
But we actually, the county is providing us with a program that we could use, and we're working towards getting that done.
Cool, I like that.
Thank you.
To answer your question about community center, he's put in to replace the refrigerator, scoring and timing pads for the pool, replacement pool covers. That alone was $25,000. He had the parking lot in there for the next year. I put it in this year. Change it around. Replacement of the air conditioning units on the roof. Looking at an alternative for heating the pool, which might be solar. We're talking pretty serious about that right now, because, you know, the cost of heating that pool is pretty substantial. You know, that pool is an expensive part of that there.
Geothermal might be.
And we talked that too. So I'm actually Adam at Titan is gonna, they have expert consultants. They do a lot of this other stuff as well. So he's hooking me up with one of these people that can help us evaluate this stuff and make some decent decisions on that. Looking down the road, he's looking to replace the roadside sign with a digital sign. Of course, they want to do White's Island, which is, you know, this big box. That will be probably north of $1 million. And
The figure again,
the grant.
the grant will be how much?
So the whole project is probably going to be north of $1 million, and the grant's 50%. So we're looking at having to spend $500,000 from somewhere. You want to do that. So I mean, that's in the next year, the third year.
And then 25.
Yeah, and then we're looking at upgrading. He wants to buy an ATV to work on maintaining the trails and use around. Work on the downtown trails, Sherman Park, around that way. Another one is replacing underground fuel tanks, which is in year 3. That's $125,000 estimate. In year 4, he's looking at wanting to build on at a wing.
Terry, did you have a question?
Speaking of White's Island and other improvements, and the idea of a marina came up tonight. And Bill, I'm glad you brought up the investment, because in the back of my mind, that money, which has been untapped, and we have, you know, been fortunate enough to see it grow, is for that kind of investment. An investment in our harbor. It's going to take matching money to get the White's Island construction, reconstruction of the footbridges, and considerable sum. When we plan for that, what I naturally turn to is that the money that is there that we do not spend, except for I look at it as an investment in ourselves. I think that is where we should plan for that money to come from, is our investment. But in addition to that, some of us have kicked around ideas about how to improve our waterfront, our harbor, to make it a more vibrant, active place. And I know I use the word haphazard a little bit too much, apparently, but I would so appreciate the idea of growing of seeing a whole plan for the waterfront that rests on our ability to invest in ourselves with, with matching grants. I'm not talking about fully funding it, but I'm talking about a real marina. I'm talking about a pump. I'm talking about a convenience store, fuel. Those are the things that we actually need now. But there hasn't been any planning done. And so it's still sort of off there, way off in the future. We need to line all of those up. I love this spreadsheet. And map out the things that we would like to invest in for the future. And I would like the budget committee to specifically put that in your own, in the way that you look at the budget too. Those things are there. We're all talking about them. Just because we don't have a comprehensive plan that includes all of those things, that we probably should. And there's no reason why we shouldn't. Just because we don't have a town planner doesn't mean we can't go ahead and plan for the things that we can see already that we need. We talk about them every time. Let's start planning for them. Let's put it on the sheet. Let's say, by here, we want this, 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 and this. And then the budget committee can recommend that's one of those things that we want to invest in. I've said everything 3 times. I hope you heard me.
You know, my caution on this has been, even with the waterfront committee right from the get-go, you know, I understand you need to spend money to make money. That's very simple. What I don't want to see happen is that we get grants, that's great, it gets us going, but now we have more infrastructure that we need to take care of every year, and the taxpayers end up having to pay for. Because the more we put on, the more help I have to get for Ted. You know, so
Right.
that's just my caution. That's just how I would see it.
No, we've got to plan more and further out, and this is a really good step in the right direction.
I think so too.
But
I think so too.
in the interest of moving forward, it sounds like there are a few things that will be adjusted
Yes.
on this for next time.
Yep.
And we definitely need to all be thinking hard about whether we want this full list or pieces of it or whatever that looks like. But like Dennis said, we're gonna have to start making some decisions by next week. So are there any other pieces that folks feel like they need in terms of information as it pertains to the capital pieces?
Again, I think Dennis has done a magnificent job.
I had help with this one.
And the budget committee, thank you very much.
So I will email all of you, I'm sorry, Dustin. I will email all of you the updated budgets that I've worked on today that I mentioned, the Parks and Rec, the EMS and the fire department, and the budget committee as well. So you can put them in your budget books and have discussion for the next
And an
time.
estimate for the sunken garden.
Yeah, have you gone and looked at that?
I have,
Okay. Okay.
We're not done yet.
You're wrapping up. You're not wrapping
No,
up.
I'm trying to move on so we can get to another thing. Can you also send this electronically updated?
Yes, didn't I already? No?
I mean, updated.
Oh, updated, yes. Okay.
Okay, no, okay, any other final question? Yes, Dustin.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw this out there. Dennis and I talked about this a little bit earlier. I was talking to my uncle earlier today who does this for a living. He's an investor and a banker and helps municipalities. And he suggested a different way of using these capital funds, which was to borrow against it. and we could maybe make money on that by getting tax exempt interest, or the banks can get tax exempt or earn tax exempt interest, so that we can kind of negotiate a lower rate on loans for that. So we've got a lot of people who know about that stuff better than I do, and I just wanted to throw that idea out there for people to chew on.
We've talked about that in the past, and the issue is that for a long time, at least for the past 4 years that I've been here, you've been able to borrow money for less money than you could earn investing the money. So it didn't make sense for us to borrow against ourselves because we're making more money with the money being invested, and then we could just get really low interest rate loans at the bank, but that could be changing.
I think what he's also referring to is this, instead of taking out a loan or
A
whatever,
TIF or what?
you borrow against your own money. You leave your money where it is, and you use that as collateral to get a loan. When the rates are real low, it might not work well, but when rates get higher, where they're going, your money is still growing in your own pocket. But if you forfeit your on the bank or the loaner takes your money out, but that's not gonna happen. It's a way, a lot of people will do that.
Dan Lay, the investment advisor for Payson, does not like using that account as leverage for loans. And he has made that pretty clear, specifically why I don't remember what he had said, but I mean, I can certainly have the conversation with him again.
I'd like to know what his thoughts are.
I mean, they did it I think they did it for the pier, right?
Yeah.
We paid the pier bond out of the capital every year.
Well, this isn't paying it out of capital, this is using the capital as collateral to get a lower rate on a bond, or rather than a bond, getting a loan at a lower rate.
Yeah, but if you're using the capital to secure a loan, the loan will then come out of taxation. Is that what you're talking about doing?
Oh,
Because that's what we're doing
you
now.
do both things, you can't put all of your capital in the loan. In other words, if you get 10 million and you can use 5 million as collateral, and the other 5 we can access.
Tom, did you have?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to discuss that. I think it's definitely a way to do it. It's another way to do it. The thing we have to be careful of, I think, in the near term is we have interest rates. We also have what is the trajectory of that investment account going to look like? May not look like it's looked the last 3 years.
And they say that every year.
They do.
And Dan will admit that. He's like,
But this year it might be true.
Yes, I
Because
know.
if you look at what the market has done over the last 3 months, it's very different than the last 3 years. And so, I think as we look to pull money out of there, it makes a great deal of sense to do it for the kinds of things we're talking about, or the order of magnitude you talked about, Dennis. We probably have to be very careful as we look through this year as to, how this economy is going to behave.
You figure that one out. You're doing that. This is just so many unknowns.
Watch the Dow Jones all day long.
It drives me nuts, so I just don't watch it anymore. I would add that I did tell you in the previous meeting, I was waiting for state revenue sharing estimates to come out. They did last Friday, I think. And so I'm gonna up our revenue estimates by 250,000. State revenue sharing looks like forecast to be just over 824,000. I don't feel comfortable enough doing the whole 824,000 because it is an estimate, but I feel pretty comfortable going to 650. And we were at 400, so I think that's good news. But again, this economy tanks and sales and income tax go down, we could get caught. So I really don't feel comfortable going to full amount.
All right, under other budget discussions, we had asked previously, for more information from Lincoln County Television, and Claire is here, and had asked to speak briefly. So I wanted to allow her to do that. That's good with the board.
Hi, I'm Claire Summer, and I'm the marketing director for Lincoln County Television. Larry would have been here, but he's actually on vacation to see his daughter and his aunts. So I wanted to just check to see if the select board and the budget committee does have a copy of the letter that we sent at the end of last year.
Yes.
Yeah, it was,
What
in
Dennis
the-
sent.
it was in the packet.
Oh, right, thank you.
So what we're asking, the select board to consider is using some of the fees that the town receives from the cable company. The franchise fees are paid to the town every year, because the cable companies are using the public right of way to for their cables and to come into our homes, and they have to pay for that privilege because the public right of way belongs to the public and it's the town. So those monies that come into the town every year from the cable companies, there's nothing set in stone about how those are supposed to be used, but there is kind of a tradition of supporting public access television as a public good. In the past 2 years with the pandemic, Lincoln County Television has really responded to the community's need for information with over 60 in-person, standing outside updates with Lincoln Health professionals, letting people know what was going on with the pandemic right in our community. We host a bi-weekly chamber chat, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but Pat Cloutier from the Denver-Scotty Region Chamber of Commerce will sit down with business owners every 2 weeks, and they have a half-hour conversation. Now, these shows are not only on Channel 7, if you're a Tidewater or Spectrum customer, but they're also archived on the LCTV website. And they're used by the businesses as marketing tools. And 2 final points. One is we were really happy with Schooner Fest last year, and I don't know if any or all of you had a chance to be in town. It was actually really, really fun, even though it was raining. And we worked with one of our videographers, Lang Shepard, and we put together a really fun, professional, promotional half-hour show that we broadcast on Channel 7 and is also on our website, and it's been downloaded hundreds of times because the businesses who were part of Schooner Fest used it for promotional. And then finally, we did a lot of basketball games this year. We live streamed over 90 basketball games from Adomic Valley High School and from Lincoln Academy. We also did some middle school stuff. For this year, we also added wrestling. So over 60 nights, our crew was in one of the 2 high schools, live streaming every one of the home games. It was a ton of fun. It was a ton of work. And for those of you here in Wisconsin who have kids who go to Lincoln Academy, you know what a good season it was. We had over 10,000 YouTube views for all of the Lincoln Academy games. So I'm just here to, thank you for this opportunity to answer any questions you have about what we do. We are here for the community and for all of you as municipal leaders. And I do hope that you'll consider supporting us in our work this year. Thank you.
My dogs were on the chamber chat, by the way.
I saw, of course. I did have a question because I know Wiscasset Games used to be on there, as were select board meetings, I believe, and possibly some other government meetings. So do you know if that is open for discussion in terms of coming back?
We would love that. And just to let you know, the nice thing is that when we archive municipal meetings on the lctv.org website, it's on our servers. They're never going away. I don't think YouTube's going away, but they're on our servers. And we also trim them and add, a beginning and an end. So for people watching the meetings again, they're sort of neatened up.
Yeah.
If the Board of Selectmen and the town decided that they did want LCTV services, what would your cost be to the town to provide those, as she was talking about, the meetings? pretty much, I guess, the select board meetings, and that's what was done in the past, I believe.
Yeah.
So LCTV, our budget, which is gonna come in at about $200,000 for this year, the letter that you got in December, we had been projecting a 250 budget, but it's now down to about 200. If we do municipal meetings for Wiscasset, now you're already on YouTube, you've already got that working, you've got your Zoom working. Our job is to provide public, educational, and government access to citizens. So there's no charge to the town for helping your citizens access municipal and public meetings. But what we do hope is that the community and the town actually supports what we're doing as a public good.
Well, when I was on a previous select board, it was several years ago, I distinctly remember like a $3,000 a year fee for LCTV. So perhaps since that time, maybe you're changed your, I don't know.
Well,
Whatever.
the fee, it's not a fee for the services, it's the town supporting the station out of the cable franchise fees that the cable company pays to the town.
John?
Yeah, can I just ask on this, this P and L information, where do the town, which line item is the town contributions that you collect?
Sure.
Is that under the donations or under grants?
Franchise fee revenues, right?
Franchise fee revenue?
Under income.
Yes.
So that $44,000 is for the towns and.
Correct.
So when we look at our proportion of that,
So currently, yeah, and Wiscasset is not contributing anything.
is that assumed in this number or would
No.
it be incremental to this number?
It would be incremental.
Okay, thank you.
That number that's in the proposed 2022 budget is based on what we know, either towns are already, that they're sort of ahead of, of Wiscasset in the budget cycle. They've already said, yes, we've got that money already on the warrant for you.
And so just to follow up, our donation would take you from a loss to break even.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
Any other questions?
So just for your information, the cable fees, the cable franchise fees that we collect are somewhere in the neighborhood of about $51,000. We do not allocate them for anything other than to reduce the tax commitment, so.
I personally think it's money well spent. I used to watch it all the time, and I do this. It's money well spent.
People love that.
So we should put that in.
So you did ask me to come up with a new figure for community organizations. Once we got all this information in there, I'm really increasing the library's request. And with LCTV, we're going from $62,050 to $80,300. So it's about an $18,000.
What was it, 81?
80,237 to be exact.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
And I encourage everybody to take a look at what Dennis sent in terms of all the letters for the community organizations, because we will need to come back to that, so. All right. Any other business? Here?
This is my this is a good time. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Hadley with the Main Art Gallery, and I just thought I'd come tonight to answer any questions you might have. We're happy that you wanted to see our financials. We're in a very strong position and on an upward trajectory. I just want to make a couple of comments that may or may not be helpful based on what I heard tonight on other items. Rockland has a huge for-profit marina going in. So big that some people are very concerned about the environmental impact. So again, marinas can be extremely financially solvent and helpful, mooring fees and all of that. Camden has some stress on their mooring fees, so it could be very financially good for the town. I felt like when the first part of the discussion was like, well, we're we're here to save the town. We repointed the old Academy building years ago, and it's in beautiful condition.
Yeah.
And we did the roof, gosh, $180,000 for a roof. We did the roof from a grant for $25,000 about 9 years ago. So already we've made a good impact, I think, to help the town's budget. I wanted to take the opportunity to update you, not just on our financial statements and what's happening, but also pass out a couple of things and show you, we've discussed and then talked to you about grants that we wanted to apply for and why the lease was so important, extending the terms of our lease to 20 years that we have with the town. If you recall, we applied to the Belvedere Trust Foundation last year, and the Selectboard had said, well, tell them that you're gonna try to do it or whatever. And I did, and they said, nothing's doing, you need to have either ownership of the building or a longer lease. The Davis Foundation had given us the roof grant 10 years ago for the $25,000. Before it came on, the board applied for more funding. They said, no, your lease is too short. Why would you make that investment in you with such a short lease? When I inquired with the Davis Foundation and the 1772 Foundation, and told them, the first question, do you have a lease or do you own the building, and how long is your lease? And they both had, now it's gotten so sophisticated for grants, they have you submit a letter of inquiry first. They ask you a few questions to see if they would really seriously consider you before you go to the trouble of filling out a long document. In both cases, they asked about the lease. In both cases, I was able to say, the townspeople of Wiscasset have voted that we are to move ahead and, negotiate a longer lease. And so we were allowed to apply. I'd like to show you those applications. I want you to see what goes into them and how beneficial they are. We feel very strongly we're going to get a $25,000 grant, and I will know next week from the Davis Foundation to address water infiltration into the building, establish a perimeter drain. It's the first step before fixing other things, because if you have a moldy, wet building, nothing's going to be good. Number one. Number two, James Cochan had sent her information to Dennis on the 1772 Foundation. 1772 Foundation is partly funded by the federal government. They're with Maine Preservation. We looked at it. It's a grant. It's a 1-to-1 match, so that we have applied for $5,000 from them. So the gallery will be putting in $2,500 to fund a historic condition building assessment. What it does is not only look at what needs to be done, and what the materials are, the complete history of the building, and then it gives us the total planning that you had for what to do first and how it needs to be done to keep the building in terms of all the historic preservation codes and policies. So we have moved ahead on all of that. I'd like to just share those with you, and then I'll take any questions you have on the financial statements, if you all received those.
Yes, a couple hours ago. And I wanted you to know that we are putting this back on our regular agenda for what is April 5th.
April 5th.
Yes. So if you're able to be at that meeting, I think that would be, because I also don't want to make the budget committee stay either. In terms of, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were coming tonight, and so
I thought that you did know.
Oh.
So,
no, because
it was because she had sent in the financials and Dennis had sent them out. So.
Okay, but it's the ones we got at 3:00 today, right?
Yeah, sorry. Well,
Okay.
yeah, my treasurer was literally on the road.
Do you mind coming back on the 5th?
Oh, no, we knew we'd be coming back on the 5th to
Okay,
discuss the lease. But I understood this was a budget workshop and you wanted financials, so I wanted to be here to address the financials.
yeah, I think wires got crossed. I'm sorry about that.
I do come out with this.
You do, just
You
got it right.
got financial,
just
I
get to do
emailed
it all
Steve.
over
Okay,
again.
yeah, yeah, feel free to.
So, well, these, I can leave these true. I just wanted to let you see, these are the grant applications. This is 1772. So if you just want to look at it tonight, this is so intense, I didn't have a chance to make a copy, but it kind of shows you all that goes into it, and how the research was done and the work was done to keep that building what it should be. I'm so sorry, I thought I was on the agenda for tonight to
No,
discuss the
sorry.
financials.
I'm sorry, there was miscommunication there. But thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you waited that long.
I thought you were gonna be on Zoom tonight, so.
Yeah, I wrote you and said I was coming.
Oh, well, I didn't see that one.
Sorry, yeah, okay, okay, that's all right. Thank
So,
you,
so I
Gary.
think we'll all definitely look at the financials
Okay.
for the next one. So thank you for sending it. All right. Any other board business for tonight? Okay. Hearing none, I
Oh,
will
yeah.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
Moved and seconded, calling for a vote, all those in favor? We are adjourned at 7:32.